Welcome everyone. This is Bijette with the Education Committee with Maine Summer Camps, and I'd like to introduce our presentation presenters today, Andrea Karkos and Derek Simkowitz, with the Androscoggin Financial. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If you can't, feel free to chat because we can see if any of you type anything to us. So I am Andrea Karkos, and Derek Simkowitz is across the table from me. So you'll be hearing from both of us today. So today, basically what we want to cover is we want to discuss a capital markets overview, give you all an idea of what is going on now, and this week particularly in the market has been interesting. So unless people have specific questions about that, we probably won't spend a lot of time there. But we also want to discuss with you all options that you have for saving and investing in what different buckets, so to speak, that we might be utilizing, and then talk about long-term planning and advice. So this slide just touches briefly on the types of options that you have available to you, both from a saving and an investing standpoint. So there are stocks. So stock, as many of you are probably aware, it's also referred to as equities in the market. Stocks are buying into ownership of a particular company. Then we have bonds. Also, many of you are probably aware what bonds are, but that is purchasing a debt obligation. Also, potentially for a corporation, but also we have municipal bonds, we have government bonds, and that is accessing the debt obligation either of a local municipality or our federal government. And then CDs, which are bank products, those are certificates of deposit. Those can be both short and long-term investments. You give up liquidity to the money for a period of time, for your contract period, and you are promised a certain annualized rate of return. MM stands for money markets. So money markets are actually a hybrid checking and savings product. So they have a little bit more accessibility than traditional savings accounts. But ironically, even though they're more accessible, they over time have shown to have better interest rates. So like, for example, our bank has a very competitive money market rate that we're advertising like crazy right now. That's a personal money market for 1.1%. So that's not bad for your money being liquid, available to you, but it's still, while it's sitting there, it's going to earn 1.1% for you. And then those question marks are designed to represent just everything else that's out there, which Derek and I will touch on that as we go through the presentation, but it was too many bubbles. We'd fill up the whole screen.
Sorry. So, hey, this slide, capital markets overview, most of the conservative solutions, starting with FDIC insured savings, money markets, and CDs, going into the fixed income bonds that Andrea referred to earlier, are interest rate driven. And, most of you know, I think everyone knows at this point, we've been in a low interest rate environment for many years, probably close to 10 years now almost. And eventually rates will go up and will normalize, and we're beginning to see that process. Looks like the 10-year Treasury, which mortgage rates are based off of, is going to potentially reach 3% this week or next. So we're starting to see an increase in interest rates. I think the bank just recently rolled out a 5-year CD that was north of 2%, and I hadn't seen that in quite a long time. So this shows the yield curve, and what's important to see here is the gray line, the gray dotted line was, how different maturities. So think about a CD or a Treasury, the compensation you would get for the amount of time you lock your money up. And that gray line basically shows the longer you go out, the more higher rate of return that you would get. Well, the blue line is our current yield curve. And what you can see is the market believes that interest rates are going to be going up. So you're not really getting a ton of compensation for going out long term. So, we bring this up to kind of give an overview of where we think interest rates are. For many, many years, it was they're low and probably not going higher. Now we're starting to see interest rates creep up, pretty much across the board. That's going to affect the decisions that you make with the savings accounts, the CDs, and the money market accounts. This gives you a little overview of where interest rates have really been. And this is the Fed funds overnight rate. So think about if a bank doesn't have enough in deposits and they want to do some lending, they will borrow money from the Federal Reserve. And this is the rate that they would borrow it for, overnight. And you'll see back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that rate was all the way up to, 6.5%. You'll see when the equity market went down through the tech bubble, through the early 2000s, those rates, went down again. Carefully creeped up to north of 5%. I started doing this in 2007, and you could get a, 1-year CD for 4 or 5% at that point. And after 2007, you'll see a nosedive in interest rates and very little movement for, a 6-year period. And you can see slow movement through 2015, 2016, 2017. Well, we're starting to see that change as we refer to it in the earlier slide. So I think it's important for everyone to know the opportunity to get higher rates of return on bank products, more normal rates of return, may be coming about. You'll see on the right side of this slide, you'll see a blue line, and I guess I would say a brown line. The blue line is what the Federal Reserve thinks interest rates will be 2018, 19, and then over the long run. The brown line is where the interest rate market has it pegged. One of them is going to be right, one of them is going to be wrong, and the more right or wrong they are, can affect the overall interest rate market. There's a chart on the box, on the slide that shows the December 2017 forecast. You'll see unemployment very low, inflation very low. We're starting to see inflation creep up, GDP is creeping up, interest rates will need to follow.
So this, to follow what Derek was saying, this talks about the nominal and real 10-year Treasury yields, which if we were to reflect back on what we just saw, this you would, if you were to blow this up, because this obviously is going back much farther than the previous slides, this goes back to 1958, but if we were to blow up the more recent years like the past slides were, you'd see this follow closely what Derek was just talking about. Obviously, we've seen a huge downward pressure on the Treasury yields from the early 80s on. We have a lot of clients come in and say, I remember when I could get, 15, 16% in my bank accounts, in my CDs. And we said, and you also remember that you paid 18 or 20% to get a loan. So obviously those two things, of course, go hand in hand. But this just demonstrates how much those have been driven down over the past 30 years. And as Derek alluded to, they are trying to normalize rates. And for them, their version of normalizing rates means raising them. So we should see this pick up. But obviously, based on the history here, it can be a slow and steady change over a long period of time.
If I can add something, to put some context around this, we tell clients, there's 3 things any investment can give you, and that's including, from the most conservative savings account all the way out to, an aggressive portfolio. The 3 things you can ask for from your money are safety, liquidity, access to your money, and a higher rate of return. Well, there's no investment that has all 3. So we want you to walk away with, and we want clients to walk away with, for each bucket of money that you have, whether it's your operating account, specific projects or long-term, you know, endowments or whatever it is, you got to pick 2 out of those 3 to position for that bucket of money. We'll talk about the different solutions that can provide those 2 out of 3, but, you know, for your operating accounts, what you're really looking for is safety and liquidity, and the rate of return isn't nearly as important. But for money that's kind of, you know, we'll talk about this a little later, a little further out, by putting it in low yield solutions, you know, your rate of return is really jeopardizing what you can potentially achieve with that money. So it's a little context.
So this next screen talks about historical rates. Very at the bottom, in sort of small letters, it says we have long-term government bonds, intermediate government bonds, and then our 30-day Treasury bills. So that white line that cuts through each one of those colored bars demonstrates the average over time that each one of those can achieve as a interest rate for you. So 5.1% in a longer term bond, 4.5% in intermediate term bonds, and 3.4% in the 30-day Treasury bills. Then you look at what the current rates are paying now. This is what drives these conversations with the clients, where they say, I remember when. Because the current long-term bond is only going to pay you about 2.7%, intermediate 1.8%, and the 30-day Treasury bills is a very sad 0.3%.
And when we're thinking long-term government bonds, you're talking 20 or 30 years. You know, so it's longer term than what you would see at a bank. These are baseline interest rates, just to kind of give you an idea of where we are from an interest rate cycle. All right, so, you know, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but, you know, we're a planning group, and so, you know, we partner with Raymond James Financial. They're an independent broker-dealer, and when we talk about independence, it means we really have the entire universe to choose from for our clients. And so our time is really built on building the plan and the concepts that will drive, you know, the decisions we make with our money. And one thing that we talk about is time-based segmentation. For lack of a better term, and this is a popular buzz term, is the bucket strategy. So if you think about all the money that you have, and you think about near-term needs, intermediate-term needs, and then longer-term and legacy needs, going from 1 year to 15 years. And, you know, some of you folks may have, you know, separate accounts for each sort of purpose. You know, kind of think about it that way. You know, if we're looking at, you know, a year or two, money that's going to be coming in, going out, more operational accounts, you know, cash and cash equivalents is really where you need to be. You know, we need the safety, we need the liquidity, you need to know that that money is there, and the rate of return is not overly important because inflation will not eat away at that rate of return as quickly. As you go further to the right and look at those intermediate term needs, well, you know, hey, you want to have some more conservative solutions in there, but, you know, you want to find a balance and maybe get a higher rate of return. If you know, whether it's personally, organizationally, if you know you're not going to touch your money for 15 years, you know, the safety, while it's important and you want to match your money up to your, you know, risk tolerance, you know, if you put money into something and then 15 years later open up a statement, that's the value of it at that point is really what matters. So, you know, matching your money up to where your planning needs are versus, you know, rates of return is a really good strategy to building a plan. All right. So I love this slide. I use it with many clients. You know, it's goal-based wealth management, and basically, you know, you look at your short-term goals. So, you know, that includes emergency reserves, funding of total spending needs for 3 to 6 months. For a business or organization, 1 to 2 years is what I would consider short-term. You know, because I think there's a higher level of safety that's needed. So, you know, those are your short-term CDs, money markets, savings accounts, checking accounts, things that you know are going to be there and can get you some level of return. Medium-term goals. Now, a lot of this is based towards, you know, personal folks, so this college, home, but, you know, I think about the nonprofits I work with, and, you know, maybe there's you know, a building fund or a particular project that is maybe 10 years out, and they, should get a rate of return that's higher than what the bank's going to pay. That's where you can use some stocks, some bonds, be more balanced. Long-term goals, so, a scholarship fund, something that we see this a lot with, or, some sort of endowment where, hey, we don't really think we're going to use the principal. We really just want to use the growth off of it. And we want to make this last as long as possible. Well, if you think about a scholarship, the cost of, attending the camp typically, goes up. Things get more expensive. So you need some growth on there in order to cover some of those expenses. The real meat of this slide is really the second part of this. And we like clients to walk away with this, stocks, bonds, and then a mix of 50-50. You'll see on a 1 year on stocks, the best stocks have done in any 1 year is 47% up. The worst it's done is 39% down. Well, that's a really wide range of returns. So if you tell me you need your money 1 year from now, and I say, look, it's going to be somewhere between 47 and 39%, that's a pretty uncomfortable range. Bonds, somewhere between -8 and +43%. In a balanced portfolio, -15 to up 33. Well, for your money that you're going to use in the next year, none of those solutions is appropriate because the range of returns is too wide and what you need is safety and liquidity. But when you start to go out 5 years, particularly on that 50-50 mix, call it a balanced portfolio. Any 5-year rolling period, pick the worst time to invest, in that period from 1950 to 2016. The worst that portfolio has done is +1% average. That's not cumulative, that's average annual return. So we bring this up to you because if you have money that you're not going to touch for the next 5 to 10 years, the world is your oyster. The options are really unlimited as long as you're being balanced. Look at the 10-year rolling period. If you're 10 years away from retirement, and we're talking personally here, only one 10-year rolling period was an aggressive portfolio negative. So I like using that 5-year rolling period. If that's our baseline and you're balanced, there's a really good chance that you're going to have positive returns. Not guaranteed, but we have a long history of how different plans have done in different market environments. The 20-year rolling period, well, most of us can't look at 20 years out, but you can see how it's universally positive no matter really what you do.
And I just want to comment on this slide too. One of our goals for clients, whether they are institutional clients, personal clients, organizations, nonprofits, what have you, we really at the very least, when we look at your money all together, we want to make sure you're at least pacing inflation. And so inflation is lower now than it used to be. But if we have all your money in cash or bank products, and we work for a bank, so we love bank products too, but if we have all of your money in cash or cash equivalents, then you are losing your purchasing power. You cannot take the same $2 today and buy a roll of toilet paper and take that same money 10 years from now, if it's been sitting in your bank account, and buy a roll of toilet paper. And everybody's always going to need toilet paper, So it's very important that we look at that from the bucket strategy is sort of that first step that we start with, but then we always want to step back and look big picture and make sure that, on average, over time, at the very minimum, we ought to be helping your money spend as powerfully now as it can, 10 years from now. So we have just listed here a couple of different options you have for short-term savings. So to refer back to what Derek said, the things you want to look for in your short-term accounts is liquidity and safety of those funds. So these are not the areas in which you're going to call us up and be really excited about your rates of return. This is also not the area that when you hear that the market dropped 10% in one day where you need to be worried. So you have a bank money market, which I touched on earlier. We have bank certificates of deposit, which can potentially go as short term as 3 months and then usually out to 5 years. We also have brokered certificates of deposit. So those are something that we offer through our financial services group. They work just like regular bank CDs, but they're brokered. So we can buy them on the secondary market from any bank potentially in the world, and sometimes get a better rate of return by being able to cast a wider net.
And just to put a note in there, in that scenario, the client gets, a statement with all of those CDs listed. They don't open accounts at those different banks. Those are all, packaged nicely into a CD portfolio. And those first three that Andrea mentioned are FDIC insured solutions.
Yep. And so the last one, just to be clear, is not an FDIC insured solution. They tend to be low risk, but as Derek pointed out in a previous slide, you can lose money investing in bonds. So some people have this idea that those are no risk, but we would consider them low risk.
It's been 30 years of falling interest rates in general when you look at a long-term trend. And eventually that'll turn and bonds move inverse of interest rates.
So here, we just want to talk a little bit about our approach as a planning-based firm. So sort of a shortened version of our mission statement is that we provide cost-efficient portfolio construction, comprehensive wealth management, and ongoing advice to earn your confidence and help you achieve your goals. And the way that we do that is we have several steps that we want to go through with each client that comes on board with us to make sure that we're able to do that and able to produce a comprehensive plan that ultimately should result in helping our clients achieve their goals. So first, we want to have conversations where we understand what your goals are. And then we gather information about your situation. So examples of those is, we want to look at asset statements. We want to look at debt statements. We want to get an idea of what your spending habits are. We want to get an idea of whether there's going to be a change in your spending habits. So for example, to relate it to personal clients, a lot of times people have a very clear visual of what they want their retirement to look like. They want to travel every year. Maybe they want to buy a boat. They want to buy a camp. We see a lot of that in Maine. And so it's our job to gather all that information together, because the more information that we have on our clients, the more comprehensive and accurate our recommendations can be. So then we want to evaluate your situation. Are you racking up credit card debt and not utilizing your, company's 401k? Because that means, that we want to assess that behavior and be able to help you modify it. And we want to discuss options. So this is really, it's important to understand that discussing options is really the earliest in this financial planning process that we begin talking, products or solutions at all. This is not designed to be a sales process. This is designed to be a planning process. So we really want to understand your goals. We want to develop that into a plan. And then, oftentimes we sort of back into what the solutions might be. So obviously with input from our clients, we create and implement the plan. And then part of that ongoing advice is that our expectation is that we meet with clients on a quarterly basis. And that is designed to do a couple of different things. We want to make sure that your situations haven't changed as a client. We want to make sure that the performance, that you understand it. It's important for clients to understand both good performance in their portfolios as well as bad, and make changes as necessary. And then sort of part of that monitoring your plan is obviously we discuss updates that might need to be made and observations. Because life happens. We cannot predict. Nobody can predict what their life will look like precisely 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So one of our primary goals in developing this plan is that we help you maintain flexibility in your life. We do not want to get in a situation where we cannot adjust the plan to fit your life. And so by following that plan, we want to help you reach your goals. We want to help you maintain confidence that you're on track, that you're moving in the right direction, and you're going to get where you want to go when you want to get there. And we help balance the risk-reward profile of that.
So, if I can add, for a personal client, we're talking about a financial plan. For an organization, what we're looking to potentially help with is the development of an investment policy statement. We find that, whether it's a municipality, a nonprofit, or a business, having a policy statement, an investment policy statement that outlines, how is different money invested, allows for, organizations that may change directors, decision makers. It's a document that allows, us and you to fall back on when the market's going downward, when there's changing market conditions, when new money comes in. If you get, an influx of cash, how should that money be invested? And it helps protect the organization because there's very clear guidelines on what money goes where. It's not, hey, this money goes to Androscoggin Bank, this money goes to Norway Savings. It's, this money goes into savings, money market CDs. This money, we're going to use this approach, this allocation. We build that for our organizations. It's a pretty valuable document for you to have. And I find that particularly with smaller groups, it can be something that is really important as the years go by to have that sort of in a file that you can, fall back on. Just want to add that.
So down at the bottom of the slide, we just touch on what our services are. We offer comprehensive portfolio management, and that is in-house. We do not outsource our portfolio construction to a third party. That's part of the way that we're able to be as cost effective as we are. We also have ongoing investment monitoring, periodic reviews, our financial planning. We develop our own investment strategies. We have insurance solutions. We work on cash flow and tax planning. That can be very important, as Derek mentioned, for our organizational clients and our nonprofits. Wealth management, income distribution, which can become very important in retirement, estate planning, and or succession planning for our businesses, retirement planning, and then we often are sort of the quarterbacks for our clients and help get them to other professionals that they might need. So for example, an estate attorney, very often part of that planning conversation is whether there's an estate plan for a personal client or a succession plan for a business client.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit about insurance, later on, but, succession planning and insurance planning, for organizations that have key folks that, your organization can't run if something happens to this person. Having, a plan in place for that contingency, having insurance solutions, you think about businesses that, have one person that does all the marketing and they're who the clients connect with, and that's the most important person. If that person goes away, we're in trouble. How do we plan for that, either by insurance solution or, buy-sell agreements and all of that? So that's really important in organizations. And then the succession planning, by and large, our population is getting older. I think every business is going through a transition of looking at sort of the next generation and getting them up and running. So our ability to help with that plan, I think, is valuable.
So this is just a brief video that we hope works to just demonstrate and show you guys the way the financial planning process works.
As big as they'll go.
That is as big as it will go. So hopefully nobody's on an iPhone watching this.
We can follow up with a link to this.
We can, yes. Yeah. Switch to computer audio.
We can. They can't hear. So, probably best just to go to the next slide.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I just heard none of you could hear that video. So that was a boring 45 seconds to a minute. So we will send you a link. We will make sure that Ron has that, and he can send it out to whoever is interested. But really, it's just a, you know, smoother explanation of the financial planning process and the value that it offers. So one thing that's unusual about our financial plan versus other advisors, so as Derek mentioned, we have an independent broker-dealer, so we, even though we are affiliated with a bank, we are independent advisors. And if you were to go to a firm, you know, out on the street and ask for a financial plan, the average cost that will run you annually in Maine is about $2,500. So that's expensive. And a lot of people, even though it's a valuable service, it's valuable to have a plan, develop it, and have that be an ongoing conversation, it can be very difficult for people to think about taking that amount of money, $2,500 a year, and allocating it towards that. So we do offer our plans complimentary to our clients, and part of our plan is that it's virtual. So we utilize a great program, and what happens is at the end of sort of setting it up and running through it with you the first time, which is going to take us 2 to 3 sessions, we don't hand you this big binder that's 200 pages telling you this is where you're at now, this is where you need to be, and this is what you need to do to get there. Instead, what we do is give you your own login to this program so that you can go in and see your plan. And so this is valuable for a few reasons. One, nobody takes these plans home and reads them through page by page. The other thing is, like we alluded to, is life changes. You know, things happen and things change. And a lot of times, you know, after people go through this planning process with us, that instigates changes in their life over the next 6 months or year, whether it's that they're saving more aggressively towards their retirement, maybe they're adjusting their spending habits, paying down debt more aggressively. So it's really nice to be able to go in, make those changes to your own plan, and see how it affects the end result. Whereas if you're just, you know, given a binder of a couple hundred pages, you know, scratching notes on that binder does not automatically change what it says on the 200th page. You know, so that interactive ability that you have is really nice, really valuable. Part of what you can do inside this program that's kind of neat too is there's what they call the play zone, so you can go in and play. So you don't have to make actual changes to your plan. You can say, well, I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but what if I did do this? And you have that whole zone that you can make changes and see how it might affect the plan without actually physically making those changes. So being virtual, we have found that to be really valuable for clients, and really helps it be an ongoing process as well.
So, you know, we did want to spend a little bit of time talking about, you know, solutions that are non-FDIC insured. So, you know, we're looking at the market-based investments. You know, Andrea touched earlier on stocks, bonds, and those transition into mutual funds and ETFs. And, you know, many of you know what a mutual fund is. An ETF is an exchange-traded fund that is a cousin of a mutual fund. tends to be an index fund. And the majority of the work that we do, is, mutual funds and exchange traded funds. And I would suspect that if we were looking at, long-term investments for, anyone personally, any organization, we tend to use funds because, you're talking about diversification versus, hey, I want to go out and buy, Coca-Cola stock or, any of those individual stocks. You're getting professional management. So most of our clients tend to fall into those mutual funds and exchange traded funds. They can be extremely conservative. You can buy a government bond mutual fund. They can be extremely aggressive. You can buy an emerging markets mutual fund. Our clients' solutions typically are multifaceted, so there may be 10 to 20 funds within a portfolio.
Well, because if I can just add, part of what those offer is those that just have built-in diversification, and diversification is a free way to help mitigate risk.
And so we usually do that through, what's called an open architecture advisory portfolio. And that is the core of what we do and how we help folks. And, basically, we take an asset and we go out and buy what we think is the best solutions for clients, and we manage those solutions. So think about if you have a 401k, imagine instead of picking from the funds within that 401k or IRA, you have the entire investment universe to choose from, and we're managing those solutions. That's the core of what people want. We're not talking commissions or sales charges. We're talking about being compensated for planning and advice over time. And then, being part of a bank and working with folks that, do want, some guarantees on their money. We have non-market-based investments, and those are annuities. My view on annuities and what I tell folks is, just like anything else, an annuity is a tool. If you think about a hammer, if you drive by my home and you see me on the roof with a hammer, you're going to think, well, that's a pretty good use of that tool. But if I show up at a client meeting and I slam the hammer down on the desk, probably not a great use of that tool. So, annuities are things that can offer a fixed guaranteed rate of return, backed up by an insurance company that can get you a better rate potentially than a bank solution, while taking the risk that the insurance company is going to be around for a long time. We use very safe companies. We get to use highly vetted companies through Raymond James. You're talking about the New York Lifes of the world that have been around for 100 years. And then insurance. We talked a little bit about life insurance. There's many different types of insurance, especially personally. For an organization, key man insurance, buy-sell agreements, insurance for the employees. We're talking about life insurance in that situation.
And disability.
And disability.
It's really important for
disability insurance as well. So, when we sit down with an organization or sit down with an individual, by doing the plan first and determining what are the financial goals, what is the rate of return we need to achieve to get to those goals, we then look at it as, well, what's the maximum amount of risk that we need to take in order to get there? If someone only needs a 3% rate of return, we're going to find the investments that limit the amount of risk in order to get that. You don't need to have a risky portfolio in order to get there. But let's say you're 30 years away from retirement and we wonder if Social Security is going to be there. We need to make sure that we have a big enough bucket of money to pull from. You may be more aggressive. So very client-based when we're making a recommendation on a solution. Okay. So that's it. I think we have a question.
Yep, and we want to open it up to questions. There is one that it looked like Andy asked. It also looks like he's left the conversation, but we'll still answer it regardless. So if you buy long-term government bonds, does that rate float, or do you buy them at a fixed rate? Derek, you want to take that?
Sure. So like anything else, it kind of depends, but typically when people are thinking about a long-term government bond, it is at a fixed rate. a fixed coupon rate. The value of that bond can fluctuate based on interest rates. But if you buy a bond when it's issued and you let it mature, you'll get the rate of return that is basically the coupon rate. So typically it's fixed. You can buy inflation-protected, government bonds. They're called TIPS, that will move a little bit based on where inflation is. So yes, typically fixed. I will say it's been a long, long time since I've seen a client buy a long-term government bond, because those interest rates are historically or recently been very, very low.
Well, and just to add on to what Derek said, that fluctuation in what you can earn in bonds is if you're trying to sell them on the secondary market. So if you're looking to create liquid funds and you have to sell bonds to do that, that's really where the largest risk, particularly when you're talking municipal or federal government bonds, that's the risk that you run. Is, like he said, you might have to sell it for less than you paid for it.
What about trusts? Do you work with setting up trusts for?
Yep. So I'm going to answer that a couple of different ways. One, you always want to have an attorney involved, and there are attorneys that specialize in setting up trusts. And then more specifically, there are attorneys that specialize in particular kinds of trusts. We do also have a trust company affiliated with the bank called Portland Trust Company. So sometimes they can be helpful. But quite frankly, normally what happens is Derek and I will work in conjunction with your legal professional to sort of determine what are the needs and goals of the trust. And then very often we stay on board and we'll work directly with the attorney to develop whether there's going to be investments or things like that involved on the back end.
Yep.
So for example, commonly what I see is legal settlements. A trust is created to protect the money from a legal settlement, or for a legal settlement, and needs to be paid out periodically, or not paid out until maybe a child was injured in a car accident. It's not going to be paid out till they reach age of majority. Then what you see is that it's put into a trust, managed either by an attorney or a separate trustee, and it's very, very common that we're involved on the investment side of it.
Yeah, so we would not serve as the trustee. We would work with the attorney. We would be the asset manager that works with the trustee.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So we're going to follow up. We'll send a follow-up email to Ron with some of the links, some other things maybe in the slides that if we get any additional questions. But yeah.
And everybody that participated in this webinar will automatically get an email from us with the link to the webinar. You can watch it again. We will also post it on our website under the camp members section.
So thank you, Derek and Andrea. Enjoyed the talk today, and I learned a lot. So
thank you. We appreciate being invited.
And thank you to the bank for providing this.